Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I am so excited to dive into this conversation with Dr. Shalonda Atkins. She has been a pediatrician working in the field for many years, but now she is also an unstuck strategist, which I'm excited to hear more about and have her explain it. But she is a speaker and coach who travels the world helping professional women get unstuck and create the life that you don't have to escape from. And I think we're all looking for that. I know that's something that I try and help with as well, because I think it's not about, we were just talking vacations before we pressed record. You know, she was on one before, I was just on one. And it's not about necessarily escaping our life and thinking that's the fix and the cure all, but how to create the life that flows with that still energizes you and recharges you and lights you up. So thank you so much for joining us today, Shalonda.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So can you share a little bit more about your story and your journey and what led you to going from the medical field to becoming a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey starts, and I always get the question like, how did you decide? So I work in psychiatry, and they're like, how did you pick psychiatry? And I always joke and say that it actually chose me. And I think back, my earliest memories were formed on the playground in elementary school and seeing somebody in the corner kind of like, crying. And I'm like, hold on, leaving my friend group saying, let me go find out what's going on over here. And like, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? Don't worry about it. Come over here. We got you. You can hang with us. And so I've always had this compassion, for people and a desire to excel, celebrate other people. And, fast forward in growing up, I, went to college with the idea, like most of us were kind of sold that story of go to college, get a degree, then get a job, work that job forever, retire, and then life is going to be grand. And so when I went to college, I kind of got an idea of I think I'm going to be a little non-traditional because that's not the path that I want to follow. And over the years, as I started working in a career and having children, I found a way. Back then, I didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like I was doing what I was led to do. But now I see that really was what we call intuitive leadership, but started designing my life in a way that made sense to me and my family. And people would question that, but not in a negative way, but question it more of, how do you do that? I want to do that. Like, you seem to just not be stuck. Like you're bold, you're courageous. And I'm like, am I really? And then over time, I was able to get that insight and see it. And so that kind of, fast forwards to where I am now as the unstuck strategist. And when I say that I want to create a life that I don't have to escape and help others do the same, just like you just said, it looks different for everybody because we all have different ideas of what success looks like to us. And so just helping people pull that out and push past some of the sticky thinking that we have. And so I'm happy to that we're able to talk some more about it and dive into some of those strategies.
Yeah. And I love how aligned our messages are. Mine's the bliss and you're busy. And it's like our life is what it is. And everyone's is going to look different, but that doesn't mean it has to be negative. That doesn't mean you have to live it a certain way, that you have that power to be able to empower yourself and kind of go forward in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. You see the globe that's sitting behind me. I always tell people when you think about the earth, like the earth is always doing at least two things. It's always in movement. So it's spinning, which is why we have day and night. And then it's also rotating. And during that time, just like with us, we have internal revolutions and changes. So sometimes we set out on a particular path. And then once we arrive and we don't get that sense of fulfillment that we were seeking, that we thought we're like, well, what's wrong with me? Well, it's not that anything is wrong with you. It's just that you have shifted and now it's time to realign. And that takes work. It takes a lot of insight. It takes awareness. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't taught that in school. I was taught all these
No.
other cool skills, but I
Hmm.
was not taught how to learn my internal rhythms, how to really follow my heart, or follow that compass that's within me. And so figured it out at an older age, but it's just as beautiful. So my desire is really to, to help other people, most of all, to not feel like something is wrong. Because I think it's
Hmm.
easier to default to what's wrong with me when we find ourselves in those spaces where we're feeling stuck or feeling misaligned.
Yeah, I think, you're talking about what we are taught. I think there's a lot of shoulds. I think there's a very linear process that, is kind of communicated in the education field, in society, about what direction we're supposed to go in versus, that awareness of it's not an end goal. It's a fluid, ongoing journey and process that we're all on. And that fluidity is not something to be feared, but something to really be embraced and incorporated into who we're becoming.
Yes, absolutely.
So when someone comes to you and they're like, I'm stuck, help me, what do I do? What are some of the key things that you see kind of cropping up? Are there patterns, or is there one place you might start them on that journey?
Yeah, so usually the first thing I'll dive into is really just asking them, what do you feel like your purpose is, and then that's where we kind of determine the path. So there's usually, two general broad categories. So there's somebody who goes, I have no clue, I don't feel like I have a purpose, and then there's someone who says, well, I get it, I've tapped into my purpose. It's just I feel like I can't get there to express it in the way that I want to. So usually we just kind of start with that, just some inner work, letting them verbalize where they feel they are, and then visualizing where's your end goal. So I'm a big visionary person, and I'll kind of break off with a story right here. So two things happened. My husband did some work some years ago. This is before we had kids. So this was like about 24 years ago. And he was doing some work with his job, sent him to Hawaii. And I had an opportunity to go. We only just had to pay for my flight, housing and everything was covered. And I remember going there saying, this is the most beautiful place, I've ever seen. It was my first time going to Hawaii. And I was thinking, people actually live in a location like this,
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of like a little seed that was planted. And then fast forward, maybe not quite a couple of decades, but at least like, maybe 15 years. So in 2017, we went to Turks and Caicos and we were celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. And it was maybe about 2 days before the end of that trip, and we were sitting on the beach. And then this idea just kind of fluttered in my mind, like this vision of, imagine what if we could live in a place like this, go back home, but then come here and have a purpose, like to work. And I don't know, it was just something about it. It was just like perfect. The stars were aligned and that thought came. And so I tucked that away. So fast forward to 2021. I had an opportunity to apply for a job, a contract position in the US Virgin Islands.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and even though it was on Indeed and it said remote work available, yes or no, it said no, but I still just really felt compelled. It was almost like that connected with 2017, connected with
Right.
Hawaii. It was a vision that I had seen, didn't know how I would get there and didn't even know all the details of it. But now, so I do work in the US Virgin Islands and I get to travel there. I have like a family there of, friends and, patients. And so sometimes I said all that to say is that sometimes we have glimpses
Mm-hmm.
of what unstuck would look like for us. But because we don't have a plan as to how we get there, no clue, it can be kind of daunting. And so we can easily dismiss it. But I do believe that those seeds of desire and sometimes even bursts of vision are put there. So when I'm talking to a person, we're first identifying and articulating what our purpose is, where we desire to go, having that vision and trying to make it as clear as possible. We want to have all the details. And then we start walking through like some of the ways to get unstuck, which are basically strategies to get from point A to that destination. And that first thing that we talk about, unstuck is an acronym. The U stands for unlearning the
Mm-hmm.
definition of success that we have been taught,
I
whether
love that.
it was in school, whether it was from our own family, our community, our culture, but redefining what success means to us. And for me, I remember like most people saying, well, successful means I'm going to have, multi millions of dollars, invested and in the bank, and I'll have everything that I need. Well, when I did a deep dive on that, what I really heard myself saying was, well, if I have all this money, because the money itself is, if it's just, let's say if I had $5 million sitting here, that does nothing. It's what the
Right.
money can provide. And what I thought the money could provide was really just, freedom
Yeah.
and joy and fulfillment, and I won't say happiness, because happiness isn't a desire of mine, because happiness, in my opinion, is like fleeting. I'm happy if I get on the scale and it says like I'm 3 pounds down, I'm happy. But joy and just really waking up in the morning and having a purpose, and just the freedom and the flexibility to work how I want to work, where I want to work, and, do the work that I love. And so I started thinking about, how can I infuse that into my life now? How can I design a life that encapsulates all of that now? That's success to me, not necessarily the dollar amount, in the account. So I encourage people to really get rid of fear and just put it all out there. What would make you joyous and your life fulfilled? And that's the first strategy to getting unstuck, is really
Mhm.
diving into all of that. So, and I don't know, and I'll go through all of them, but I don't know if you had anything you wanted to
Yeah.
add to that, because I saw you smile. And I
Yeah.
think you were like, oh yeah, I can relate to that.
No, I love how you talk about there's a difference between having the vision and having a plan. And I think we allow that plan part to definitely stall our vision, as opposed to trusting and just following the vision and letting the plan figure itself out. But I love that you have a framework for the plan. So the first one for unstuck is to unlearn. So let's kind of go through then what's some of the other parts of that.
Yeah. So after you are unlearning your definition of success and you have redefined what success means to you, a next important step is for the N, and unstuck means nurture your soul. And that part is really important because, as I mentioned, I got these little glimpses and I get these little hints, because the messages are there, but I can easily drown them out. I
Mm-hmm.
can easily talk myself in or out of anything. Most of us can. So, nurturing your soul is really getting to a place where you can get still enough, get quiet enough, be undistracted enough to really tap into those true desires. And I believe that a lot of us had some practice with that during the most difficult parts of the pandemic. So in 2020, during the quarantine, where a lot of things that were distractions for us, they were taken away. And so we had to learn to sit with ourselves, and that can be scary a lot of times. That can be really scary because, again, I feel like in our society we are taught to, kind of always think and to plan, and when there is really nothing to plan and you're just sitting and thinking, it can be
Yeah.
strange.
Absolutely. People embrace that busyness, sometimes as a barrier to having to really face their feelings. They hide behind the busy, and you couldn't do that anymore at that point. And it really did kind of bring to the forefront maybe some things you had ignored or kind of avoided dealing with, and now you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in nurturing your soul, and that can look different in different seasons. And I always encourage people to have multiple tools in your toolbox. Nurturing your soul, it could be really just spending time in nature,
Mm-hmm.
going into the woods or going and sitting by the beach. So I live in Charleston, South Carolina. So I am on the coast. I am on the edge of America. So going to the beach is extremely easy for us. And also it could just be sitting in your house and listening to music. We talk a lot about, mindfulness activities, or when you're eating, taking the time to taste food, feel the texture of food, feel the temperature of food, and taking time to just chew and just really just slowing down. Because honestly, if we feel stuck, but we have not yet learned how to quiet ourselves enough to hear, it's going to be very, very difficult. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be
Yeah.
very, very difficult to figure out how to get unstuck. So, nurturing your soul is an important component of that. And then the S stands for stating what you want. So, getting very clear, having that clarity to say, this is what I want, because otherwise we're still just, in different spaces, but sitting still enough to then get that clarity to say, this is what I want. I am a huge proponent of writing down and also stating goals and affirmations. So, you see behind me, I work in psychiatry. So we're always talking about, mental health and, behavior, neuroscience, neuropsychology, all of that. And so the way that our brains are wired is that once we see something or hear something, it's always going to kind of be there in the back. It may not be in the forefront. So the example that I like to give people is if someone starts talking about they're going to buy, I don't know, it's a new model of, let's say, a Jaguar or something.
Yeah.
You maybe never even paid attention to that car. And then when they get it, all of a sudden you see them around town, it's like you're looking for them, but you're not. And they're like, hey, I just saw another one. And so that's how it is. So when we begin to state our goals and, say what it is that we're wanting, there's something about we get opportunities that come our way that happen to align. And it may not be that all of a sudden this new opportunity just came. The opportunities may have always been there, but now that you have said this is what you want, you're listening for it. And of course, we know research has shown that people who write their goals, well, say their goals are more likely to accomplish them. But if you write them down, so something about like that, pen to paper, writing it down is just so amazing. So saying what you want, being clear on the direction in which you want to go. And then T in Unstuck stands for taking the step.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, probably.
Yeah, because we can be clear. We got it. We got the goals written down. We're saying these goals. We've turned them into affirmations, but there is action required. And I'll tell you, like for me, I challenge myself often. So I'm a coach, but I also have a coach and a mentor as well. And she stretches me. I feel like I'm pretty stretched, but she stretches me even more to take additional steps, to take a step. And instead of saying, okay, what next? Next in that linear process, as you mentioned earlier, but what about expanding that? So where's the expansion in that step that you just took before you even move on to the next step? So that's the action, the clarity and the action, those two together, because you can have one without the other, because we can be out just taking all these steps, but if we're not clear, then we might find out that we're just taking steps in circles.
Exactly. Just because you're taking movement doesn't mean it's always in the direction you need to go.
Correct. Yes. And then, so the next U in Unstuck is for understanding your emotions. And I don't know if you've seen one of these before, but I absolutely love this. This is a feelings wheel or an emotions wheel, and it is extremely helpful in identifying how you feel, because you mentioned earlier that sometimes we distract ourselves because it's easier to do something else than to sit with our own feelings. But it's important for us, for a number of reasons, to understand how we're feeling. Number one, if we are in good spaces, we're not always in negative emotions, but if we're in a good space, if I am feeling, elated and, optimistic and peaceful, well, I want to be able to label that so that I can be mindful of the activities that I'm engaging in during these times, because I want more of that.
Right.
I want more of that in my life. So this is how I continue it. But on the flip side, if I'm in, more of a negative space, I need to be able to identify that, because how do you correct or how do you heal what you can't acknowledge that you're feeling? And sometimes we have feelings within our body, like physically, and we don't know why, but I think it's very important that we take time, because if not, if we don't get that energy out, then from a medical standpoint, we start seeing a lot of different issues, whether it's, headaches or muscle aches, a lot of stomach aches because of the brain gut connection, a lot of GI issues, just, blood pressure, just lots of stress. So understanding emotions, a lot of people may say, well, what does that have to do with being unstuck? Well, it has a lot to do with being unstuck, because I can recognize when I'm feeling doubtful or feeling fearful. So if I'm in that state of, I'm clear on where I want to go, I'm ready to take that step, but I'm feeling something, then, I stop and explore that. And it's not necessarily to say that it's wrong. I think we've been taught to identify, good and bad emotions, but even the emotions that we classify as negative, they're still necessary. They're indicators for us, for sure.
Yeah. And I love, as you were talking, I was thinking about too, like there's, when it comes to anxiety, and I help a lot of people with that as well in my professional career as a counselor as well. People don't recognize, you talk about that mind body connection. Anxiety and excitement actually physiologically are identical. Your body doesn't know the difference except for the story that you tell it about those feelings. You're still going to have that same flutter in your stomach. You're still going to sweat a little bit in your hands. Your breathing might be elevated, but the story you tell yourself about it changes if you give it a positive or a negative meaning, even though it's the same exact physiological response. And so having that mindset, that understanding that you're talking about is huge to take that same physiology and make it work for you rather than against you.
Yes, I love that. And I have used that to help me when I've been like on stage. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm feeling these things in my body. And I was like, you know what? No, 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 girl. You're not nervous. You're not anxious. You're excited. You're excited about what you're getting ready to share. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's what it is.
Yeah, and it has a different energy. You show up differently just from that pivot of anxious to excitement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that most of the time, when like the question you asked me in the beginning, when someone comes to me and they say, I'm feeling a little bit stuck, a lot of times it really is fear. It's more fear based because most people know what it is that they want to do. Maybe not all the details of how to get there, but they kind of
Mm-hmm.
know. But it's almost like sometimes people need that permission, because I believe we all have narratives and stories that we've been told or that we've told ourselves that we just need help getting past, like pushing past. And so that's where, the emotional, and with unstuck work, that's usually where I spend a lot of time. A
Right.
lot of time with people because it's so foreign. It's like a foreign concept. Moving beyond, well, I'm feeling, I guess I'm happy, I guess I'm sad. Well, I felt a little angry, but to move beyond that, a lot of us just don't really have the vocabulary to express how we're feeling, but it can be learned.
Yeah, we're not owning what we want that feeling to be, I think, and we allow that default negative track that we fall into to kind of take the lead as opposed to saying, you know, I'm feeling this way and this is the direction I want to take it in. This is what I want it to be, and using that to your benefit to create that momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last two strategies. So the
Mm-hmm.
C in Unstuck stands
Okay.
for collaboration. Collaboration is key. There are a lot of things that we're able to do on our own and be successful. But if we want to expand our reach and really enhance our message, we have to. I mean, it's necessary to collaborate with other people who can give us different insights and perspectives and really help us get at tables and into rooms that otherwise we would not have access to. And that's one of my favorite things to do. I love, like absolutely love meeting new people, learning new things, learning cultures. I like to travel. That part doesn't scare me at all. It excites me. And about I guess it was maybe right before the pandemic. I had this shift in my desire. I didn't want to just go check off something on a bucket list. Like, okay, we saw the Colosseum, we saw the
Right.
Eiffel Tower. That's great. But I started feeling more like I wanted to have a purpose. I wanted to travel somewhere and do, interact, like do
Yeah.
something. And so when I mentioned the Virgin Islands, so that was when the first manifestation of that. So I had an opportunity to go there. So yes, I go. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I get to go to the beach and do all of these cool things and vacation, but I'm there and I'm helping, I'm collaborating, I'm doing stuff in the community. And that's been in every trip that I've taken since then, since
Mhm.
working there, we've found a way to get involved in, meeting with the locals and just learning more about the culture. But collaboration has been fantastic. Social media makes it a lot easier. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of people who say, well, I'm an introvert, I'm a little bit shy, or it just takes a lot of energy for me to, be around people. And that's okay. I think that what we're doing now, we're collaborating, we're sharing information. So that's been helpful, for me. And so I encourage people when they are feeling stuck, reach out, because there's a human component. So there's that, emotional and well-being side of it, but then also from a knowledge base, just learning more information. So That's the C behind in the Unstuck, the collaboration. And then last but not least, the K stands for creativity, spelled with a K.
Yep.
Because we can be creative, and whatever you do, always make sure that you add the essence of who you are in what you do, because otherwise you're kind of falling back into that I need to conform and be like this, but the world doesn't need more of that. The world really does need our own unique personalities. And just for example, for me, I like to have fun. And I remember saying, okay, when I'm in a corporate space, I'm just going to be serious and I'm going to be professional.
Yeah.
But professionalism still includes my personality. And
Yeah.
so I encourage people. One of the things that I like to, the analogy is, we have a blank canvas and we get to decide, what colors we want to put on there. If we want to use paint or do we want to use glitter? Do we want to use fabric? We get to decide the masterpiece that we're creating. And so that's the framework of getting unstuck, helping people to get unstuck and create the life that they don't have to escape. And like you mentioned earlier, it has absolutely nothing to do with changing geographical locations, but it's more of that internal journey that we're on, making sure that each day when we wake up in the morning that we're still excited about life. And that still takes into the account the ebbs and flows of life. We're not always going to be on super high every day, but generally speaking, we have this anchor of, just hopefulness. And so that's it in a nutshell.
I'm blown away. I loved all of that. I hope you guys are taking advantage of this little masterclass that Shalonda is giving us, because grab your notebook, replay that, because that was amazing. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that framework with us. And I definitely could resonate with so many parts of it. I think, we speak the same language, but we say it a little bit differently as far as, the power of connections. You talk about collaborations, even during the pandemic at its height, I think we saw it, and I saw it with my students, especially. It's not always about the interactions with people, but the connections we make from being around other people, their energy. You hear conversations, you just say something to the grocery store clerk, you hear other people laughing, and you still get the benefits of those connections, even if it's more indirect rather than direct, as well as that creativity piece, not only in the literal sense of what you're doing and being creative with that, but just the creativity of the flexibility that it's not only going to vary from person to person, but it's going to vary every single day. Like you said, our life has those ebbs and flows, ups and downs, and how you ride those waves is how you're going to be able to pivot and adapt and still fit in those things to keep you unstuck, rather than allow that to be the moment that paralyzes you.
Absolutely.
I loved all of that. And, just to kind of highlight, what are some of the practices that you do personally to help you that kind of follow that framework? Do you have some set things you do every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I journal. I have notebooks everywhere, including, and the benefit to having the electronic journal is it's like, wait a minute, what did I say about this? And I can just do a keyword search. But writing for me helps me to stay focused, and it also keeps me in a space of being really grateful, gratitude, which is huge for me. And then the ability to have my schedule creating my schedule the way that works for me. So I have days where I see patients, but I see them in increments. It took me a while to kind of figure out, I have an internal rhythm that flows with the day. So I have more energy. I won't say I'm not a morning person, but I have more creative energy and mental energy in the mid part of the day. So I created a schedule that accommodated that. So that's been extremely helpful. And then also connecting with people, just like you mentioned, I make sure that, because I can get focused, like hyper focused, and sit here and knock things out, but making sure that I stay connected with people outside of my home, outside of my state, outside of my country, and that helps me as well. So I make sure that I have that human connection, journaling, gratitude list, and making sure my schedule is right on the verge of, what's the word I'm looking for? So it's not set, but it's not crazy and organized. There's a routine, but it's enough to just kind of keep me on my P's and Q's, kind of shake me a little bit. So those are the things that are helpful for me. And I also like having a trip somewhere on the horizon. So looking forward to going somewhere geographically.
Yeah, no, I love traveling. That's one of my hobbies. And so it doesn't always have to be far. I do love to travel far, but sometimes just finding even like small local things, that's the point with the options and the creativity, to find a way that makes it work on a regular basis so that you don't have to wait for once a year to find that outlet. They say kind of be a tourist in your own town. You can literally find so many new and creative things that you never knew about. So I love all the practices you do. I always love to talk about gratitude as well, because I think that's an underutilized form of self-care. So I always ask my guests, what would you say are 2 to 3 things you're the most grateful for?
Well, absolutely. Hands down, I am most grateful for the opportunity to do this life with my husband and my 3 amazing children. I'm grateful. Oftentimes I'll, think of like, wow, what if I went through this by myself, and not just a bad situation, but what if it was something really good and, they weren't here to share this, or what would my life even be like if they weren't here? So I'm really grateful for their health. I'm grateful for their mindsets, their heart for people, their love for humanity. So I'm super grateful for that. I'm grateful also just for, I guess, my personality. I'm grateful because my personality allows me to, it's almost like a tool that allows me to meet other people. And it's something that comes naturally. It's not something I have to try to be. It's the energy that I carry. And so I'm really grateful for that. I didn't know it was a thing until it was pointed out, like over the years. When I was in New Orleans just a couple of weeks ago, and a song was on, we were out walking, and I just started dancing, and I turned around and there was a lady, and she came and she was dancing with me, and she said, "It's my birthday." And I celebrated in that moment with her. So just really grateful for, the light and internal energy.
I love that. I love that. So how can people find you, Sherlonda? Where can they work with you?
Well, you can find me. My website has tons of information about the different work that I do, whether it's one-on-one coaching or retreats, and that is drsherlondaatkins.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. And so always, this is one of my most favorite things to do. I love medicine. I love taking care of people, but I love also helping people get unstuck, because that's something that really crosses geographical borders. With medicine, there's a lot of limitations, but I feel like at the heart of people, regardless of where we live, we all kind of deal with some of the same things. We want the same things out of life, which is love and joy and fulfillment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all those links will be live in the show notes below. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of that amazing information. It's such a gift.
Thank you for having me. I really love this time we spent together.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.